A recent bill passed in Utah drew attention for claiming to ban experimental gender surgeries on children. And, Mary Miller was just making some reference to some of these crazy policies that are coming out of our government right now, how it runs totally counter to what the Word of God says. But what's even more troubling are those that try to hide what they're doing with deception, making it sound one way when it's really another. Now, this bill out of Utah, I'd love to celebrate this as good news, as some have reported it, but the unfortunate truth is the bill contains a massive compromising loophole, and we've actually seen coming out of Utah on these issues of homosexuality, lesbianism, LGBTQ, all of these issues, there's a real problem with a number of the laws. They're trying to somehow reach a compromise where a compromise cannot be found, and the result is nothing is accomplished. In fact, there's greater deception that is pushed forward. Now, here to explain this is Joseph Backholm, Senior Fellow for Biblical Worldview and Strategic Engagement here at the Family Research Council. Joseph, thanks for joining me today.
Good to see you, Tony.
All right, normally you're here on Fridays in filling in for me, but I'm interviewing you on this because this is a bill that you have dug into, working with the family policy councils across the country. This bill isn't what it appears to be. Tell us why.
Yeah, that's right. And this seems to be an example of something that politicians often do, which is legislating for a headline when the details may not be reflective of what the headline says. Now, this creates a pause. They're referring to it as a moratorium on gender reassignment for children, unless that child has been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. And of course, that diagnosis is very easy to get these days, as you have a lot of clinicians who will give that with not much examination. Now, the bill does attempt to establish what that is, but the reality is there are a lot of practitioners who will diagnose someone with gender dysphoria,
well, especially
rather quickly.
As the medical community has been politicized on this issue, and you see the associations, the medical associations pushing this. So, in fact, you see those who are hesitant to give this designation, this diagnosis, are often piled on by the left.
That's exactly right. And that's the second part of this bill. In addition to this moratorium, what the legislature in Utah has said is, we're going to study this issue. Let's go consult with the experts, and then we'll see if we're going to lift this moratorium down the road. Now, of course, I think we already know what these so-called experts are going to say about this issue. And in a world where people were interested in truth and were really trying to find out what the facts were, and this is how the legislature and the political system used to work, where we'd study something, we'd get good data and information, and then we would respond to that. But the unfortunate truth is we probably know what the outcome of any study on this issue is going to be already. And this is really not an issue of facts and science. This is really an issue of worldview. If you believe that people can change their gender, you're going to find facts that suggest that. And really, I think what we need from politicians these days is not a desire to go consult with people who think boys can become girls and get advice from them, but just draw the line and say, this is not something that we are going to allow. Because if you ask somebody to find a reason why you should do this, they will definitely give you that reason.
Joseph, unless I'm missing something as I read through this, the law also mandates the creation of a massive new bureaucracy to regulate the industry. So it doesn't sound like they're anticipating this going away for very long. I mean, if they're gearing up to regulate the industry with a new bureaucracy, it would suggest to me that they're going to move forward with this.
I think that is a big clue as to where they would expect this to go. And I think those of us watching this share that expectation that this is not really a desire to make sure we only do things that are good for kids. It's a desire to get political cover. So when they in Utah say, hey, this is really good, they can point to a bunch of experts who said, oh, they gave us the advice. They told us this is best for children. So we just followed the experts. We've seen so many examples recently of how the experts are often wrong. Really, this is an issue of either you want to protect kids from mutilation chemically and surgically, or you don't, and you want to find a reason to justify why it should be done. And there's a lot of clues in this bill that suggest suggest the latter approach is where Utah is headed, despite its Republican legislature.
So, Joseph, help me figure something out here. Apparently, the science in Europe is different than the science here in the United States. European countries, following the science, are trending away from these experimental treatments. In fact, they were ahead of the United States, and they've looked at the results and they say, wait a minute, whoa, we got to put the brakes on this. This is not good. Is it different science here in the United States or what?
Well, of course not. You're dealing with different political environments, and really the tribalism in the United States, because again, Europe went down this trans road before the United States did. And right now we have this tribalism where basically many on the left will say, well, if conservatives like this, I like the opposite. And in this case, if conservatives don't want to turn boys into girls and girls into boys, then I do. And despite the fact that those who pioneered this kind of science are now saying, hey, the evidence does not support this. There is not evidence to suggest this is good for kids. This is not actually relieving the mental distress of the people that we are claiming to help. So we're not going to do this anymore. We in America right now, and because it's a newer issue, we're just not listening to that because there's this tribal instinct to just win politically, get our way, and just defeat those we have defined as our political opponents. So in many ways, I think in the legislative environment, this is really a desire to beat political enemies rather than sincerely just do what the evidence suggests is good for children.
And that's where I think Utah was trying to stand on both sides. As they've done on other issues. But this is an issue that many legislatures are addressing. Several measures, like what we call the SAFE Act, stop the experimentation on children. Those acts are being advanced in many states across the country by the legislatures, are they not?
That's exactly right. And we see Missouri moving on this. We see Idaho moving on similar legislation. Montana, it's already passed in Arkansas. We see Louisiana moving on legislation like this. And so one of the reasons why Utah's approach is concerning is because we know you can do better, because lots of people are doing better. They're not consulting with left-wing medical associations to ask them for their opinion. We already know what their opinion is. We already know what they're going to tell us. And so more courageous legislators in those states are saying, no, this is not going to happen on our watch. We are going to protect kids. We are going to be the adults in the room and make sure that 20 years from now, the children in our state are not looking at us wondering why we didn't do more to help them. So because people are doing better, that's all the more reason why Utah can improve on its current approach.
Yeah, absolutely. Joseph Backholm, thanks for joining us. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Tony.